or some. This is a game that combines set collection, dexterity, card play, and really a lot of other ideas, a lot of other mechanics, while at the same time still trying to be a family-friendly in terms of complexity, not just art, but a simple family-oriented game. It is a game about mining. Players will have their cards, they will move them around, they mine. They will try to collect different types of materials and then to sell them for the highest profit that they can get. Now, some general concepts. The game is played on a board that kind of looks like this. Doesn't have to look exactly like that because it is modular. It is made by placing these tiles, and part of the game itself is to set up the board as players take turns adding tiles to form a 5x5 grid. Most tiles that go in the mine are generic, but then we have some unique tiles. Each player has 2 tiles of their colors, say these are the 2 for green. One is the corner tile that represents the starting tile, and another one is a tile that is particularly profitable for that player. When a player digs or in the tile of their color, they're gonna find more stuff. This is also why during setup, your special tile is given to another player that will try to put it probably as far as possible and in as hard position to reach as possible. However, as you can see, the map is pretty busy, and there are just so many connections everywhere that, to be honest, I don't know that it makes that much of a difference that you're building it as part of setup. My impression is that if you were just setting it up randomly, more or less, it would be the same. It's very hard level of setup to build it and create a strategy around the way you're building it, since there's so many variables that will come into play later. So each player has a card, hooray, then players can also use action cards. You will have a hand of cards, and these cards do, well, different things. Maybe you use dynamite to place shafts there that will block sections of the mine so the cards cannot move through them. You get extra movement, you get extra ore, you steal ore, you protect your ore from stealing. This kind of things. You get a sense of how these things work. You'll be able to play cards during your turn whenever the effect applies. There are 2 other types of cards, which are contractor cards. There are 2 types of cards. These are the contract agent cards, and these contracts allow you to score a lot of points, which is to acquire a lot of money. Basically, to fulfill one, you need to discard that set of cubes representing ore, and you will gain the corresponding amount of money. If I discard 2 copper and a silver and I have this contract, I also discard the card and I gain $8. If I discard 2 silver and gold and I have this card, then I discard it and it's 23. Pretty good. Now, as you can see, they come in 2 different decks, and you can, when you place your hand, you can draw from either or both. Basically, when you draw at the end of your turn, you can select any of these decks or any combination of decks to draw from, special actions or contracts to fulfill. There are these 2 game pieces on the board that represent these 2 people. Basically, when you fulfill a contract, you're selling material to this woman, if you're fulfilling one of these contracts, or to this dude here, if you're fulfilling one of these contracts, you're selling to that dude. In fact, when it is time for you to fulfill your contracts, your card needs to be within 4 spaces from the person you're selling to, 4 spaces within that person, without taking into account the rails. So, and 1, 2, 3, 4, any four, as long as it's not diagonal, I assume, any orthogonal ones are fine. And these game pieces will move during the game. Now, during the game, the cards will also have cubes on them, and we'll see how that works. But basically, each turn starts with a movement phase in which all players move. And then you have a dig phase in which all players take different types of actions. For the move phase, each player will roll a die of their color, and that is the number of spaces that they can move. These dice only have numbers between 1 and 3 each repeated twice. So you move between 1 and 3 spaces. Before the players move, however, these 2 game pieces move. The guy moves towards the card that has the most ores in it, and suppose at that point it will be that one. The lady moves towards the card that has the fewest ores, cubes of ore in it. It is a tie. Then you start with the starting player and you see which of the tie player is the closest to the starting player to see where that contract agent is actually moving. As we said, during the game you will acquire cubes that you will place in your cart. Basically, in each cart you can place 2 cubes comfortably there at the bottom, and if you have a second layer of cubes, it's already showing up a little over the edge. This is important for game purposes. And of course, maybe you want to put a lot of cubes there, but they need to be able to physically stay there. In fact, when you're moving your cart, if a cube falls, it stays where it fell. Suppose that I move here and the cube fell there. Then if it falls off the mine, you put it in the tile that is closest to it. And then I move again and I'm totally clumsy and this cube falls and falls there and we leave it there. Another thing, as you move, you need to move only in one direction. That is, you cannot revert direction. So, as you can see here from the connections, say if I'm here and I'm moving this way, then I could move there and continue there. If I'm here, or if I start here and I move here, I could continue that way, but I couldn't go from here and then change and go here because I would change direction there. It's more intuitive to look at and to do it than it is to explain. As you move, you may bump into other players' cards, in which case, if there are cubes that show over the edge, when you move in an area that has another player's card, the card moves to the next space and one of the cubes that shows over the edge falls and goes in the space that the card that was just hit just left. And so as the game continues, you may have different cubes that are scattered around because people actually dropped them, because people bang into each other. I suppose that I keep moving and I bang and I hit that one again. There was still one that was showing over the edge. There you go. That's a good example of things that can happen. So that's for movement. You move around, you try not to bump into these things if there are game effects that place them there. Again, you may end up losing things, stuff maybe may fall because people hit you, but that is pretty much what happens for the movement phase. Then we have the dig phase, in which 3 different actions can happen. One is mandatory. As far as I understand, the rulebook and the player aid are not entirely clear. As far as I understand, one action is mandatory, which is to dig for ore, and the other two actions are optional. I may be wrong again because the phrasing is not entirely clear, but that's how I played it, so that's how I'm going to describe it. Dig for ore. Each player will draw 2 cubes from the bag and will add them to their cart. If you are in the tile of your own color, then you dig 4 instead of 2. And you try to add them as best as you can to your cart. I'm pretty good, huh? So, you dig 2 or 4 depending on where you are. Then it is time for you to sell some of the ore. If the ones that you have on your cart match one of your contracts, then you can fulfill it, again, if you are within the right distance from the right contract agent. I have this card, I have 2 silver and copper, and I have 1, 2, 3, and I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 from the agent. I can fulfill the contract. At this point, I'm allowed to empty my cart. I take out the ones that I'm using to fulfill the contract. And then I can rearrange the other ones there. And I probably want to put the good ones at the bottom and the copper on top because I'm not a dummy. Because that's how you do it. In this phase also, you can pick up or that is in the same area where you are at that point after moving. So this is pretty much the general idea. If you, during the phase in which you sell stuff, you do not necessarily have to fulfill a contract. You can also just sell any combination of cubes to the bank for these prices here, which is less than what you get if you fulfill a contract, but it's still better than nothing if your cart is full and there's just a lot of copper there. Well, better than nothing, you can sell it that way. In any case, if you're not fulfilling a contract and you want to thin out and you want to empty your cart a little, then that is how it works. So you will collect tokens representing coins, and this is really what you're trying to do the most. You play like this, alternating movement turns, movement phases, and dig phases each turn. At the end of the turn, again, you get action cards and or contract cards. You continue like this until the last turn, until the end of the last turn. Then players sell everything that they have in their cart, even if they had to sell it at bank prices. And at the point, the player with the most money, the wealthiest player, is the winner of the game. Orsum is a game that should be simpler than it is. It is a game that has a lot of moving parts, and once you get to learn them and to see how they work, and it's not all that easy to get there because I didn't find the rule book all that effective. But once you get to see all of these moving parts, you start getting the sense that they don't really do much. They don't really add anything. You almost feel like it's a set collection game a la Splendor or Century with other moving parts that don't do much. And you feel like, well, maybe I should just remove those parts and play the game as is, but then the core of the game is against Splendor or Century. What I mean about those moving parts that just make playing the game cumbersome but don't add much. Setting up the map. You're making all of those strategic decisions, but the map more or less will make it such that you'll get to a lot of different places anyways. And with the exception of your special piece, every other piece is pretty much equivalent to every other tile. So really, the way you connect doesn't feel like it means much, or it doesn't give me the sense that there's a lot of strategy there, because then it'll be about bumping my opponent, but it'll be based on where the opponents go, not on how we created the map at the beginning. Those contract agents, those game pieces that move around, you have to move them around each turn. But ultimately, the range that you have to complete contracts, I almost never had a situation where a player wasn't able to complete a contract that they had. You need to spend a lot of resources and playing cards to make sure that the player is in one corner and the contract agent is in the other corner. And well, then the player will just do it next turn. It's not like, well, if you don't complete it now, you will never be able to complete it. If you don't complete it, I'll complete it instead. You do it next turn. So that's really not all that much. I don't know that there is any difference. There would be much of a difference if you did not have the contract agent and you simply completed a contract each turn if you have the resources to do so. The cards. You have all these action cards, but many of those are really situational. And then we get to another point. Since they're very situational, you may never really use them. And after a while, players are likely to stop getting those cards almost entirely, if not entirely, and to start getting contract cards instead. Remember, you can choose action cards or contract cards, and you will want a lot of contract cards. Why? Sheer complete luck. Because all of these things, you move the contract, play your contract agent, you get those cards, you dig, you do all of the dexterity thing, etc., etc. And after you do all of these things, you don't draw the right cubes. There isn't much that you can do there. You have a contract, silver and 2 copper, 3 gold, etc., etc., and you just don't draw the right cube, so then there's nothing you can do. With all of these things that you need to do to be able to play the game is massively luck-based. And that's why players are likely to stop getting action cards altogether and get as many contracts as they can to increase the chances that they'll be able to complete some contracts and not just sell cards to the bank at the minimum price. And then there's just a couple of other things that are a little bit like, for example, what happens if in fact you do have a nice stack of cubes in your cart and you don't remember exactly what you have in the cubes that are not visible, I think I should be able to complete this contract. What happens if you try to complete it and once you look in your cubes, you don't have it? I don't know that I don't remember the rulebook covering that. The idea of set collection and dexterity, I think it's okay, although I'm wondering why. Set collection is about planning, is about resources, is about budgeting, opportunity costs. The dexterity element feels unnecessary, feels almost like feels gratuitous, like we wanted to have a different set collection. I don't think that it really adds anything. And after a while, players, if they're adults players, will figure out ways of really creating mighty stacks. And so again, that either feels irrelevant or it adds a random element that doesn't really do anything. And that's pretty much, again, the general idea here. It's a game where, as I keep saying, there are all of these things that you do, that you implement, and at the end it just feels like it's somewhat a blurry version of Century of Splendor. So I can't really recommend this game. I know that I kept thinking almost every move that I made in the game, I wish I didn't have to do it, and we just got to the point where I draw some cubes and I tried to complete a contract. It almost felt like the game could be slimmed down to almost only that, and there would be much of a difference. So, Orsum feels like a game that takes more work to play than there should, and after you play it, you have a game that frankly is mediocre at best. There are just so many other strong competitors these days in the set collection category, then adding dexterity and adding a lot of rules and components that don't really do much. I don't think that really strengthens the game. If anything, it makes it weaker. Frankly, this game just didn't do anything for me. I can't say I hate it actively, but I wasn't entertained. I didn't enjoy playing it. The more I played it, the more I wish I was playing a simpler set collection game. And I guess that's what I had to say about Orsum.